Canadian government was obligated legally to investigate President Bush for war crimes while he was on Canadian soil, specifically crimes related to torture. That did not happen today, but this week there was major new news about the Bush administration and torture, specifically at secret CIA prisons that everybody calls the black site prisons. The news was reported by American author and journalism professor Mark Danner, who obtained a confidential report from the Red Cross. This report, for the first time, details torture at the CIA's secret prisons. Now, we know quite a bit about what has happened at prisons run by the U.S. military, places like Guantanamo, Abu Ghraib, Bagram. In the case of prisons run by the CIA, we don't even know what these secret prisons are exactly, or even where they were, or how many of them there were. We only know that they existed, and that President Obama has ordered that they be shut down. That was essentially all we knew, until now. Mr. Danner has published parts of a Red Cross report that says, in no uncertain terms, that the U.S. tortured prisoners at these black site CIA prisons. Take, for instance, Abu Zubaydah. Captured in March 2002, Zubaydah describes to the Red Cross his experience in a prison that's believed to be in Thailand. Waking up naked, strapped to a bed in a very white room, after being shackled to a chair for 2 to 3 weeks and deprived of solid food, Mr. Zubaydah recounts, quote, "I was taken out of my cell and one of the interrogators wrapped a towel around my neck. They then used it to swing me around and smash me repeatedly against the hard walls of the room." The Red Cross reports that Zubaydah was then placed in a coffin-like tiny box that restricted his air supply. Then he was moved into a smaller box where he was forced to crouch for an extended period of time. That was just weeks after he was treated for gunshot wounds to his legs and groin. Mr. Zubaydah continues, quote, "I was then dragged from the small box, unable to walk properly, and put on what looked like a hospital bed and strapped down very tightly with belts. A black cloth was then placed over my face, and the interrogators used a mineral water bottle to pour water on the cloth so that I could not breathe." Waterboarding. And then some, for about a week. That's torture. And Zubaydah's account is strikingly similar to the accounts of 13 other prisoners held in the CIA black site prisons and interviewed by the Red Cross before they had ever had an opportunity to match up the stories that they would tell their interviewers. Joining us now is Mark Danner, a journalism professor at the University of California at Berkeley. He published his full account of the Red Cross report in the latest issue of the New York Review of Books. He's also the author of the 2004 book, Torture and Truth, America, Abu Ghraib, and the War on Terror. Mr. Danner, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
Why do you believe that this Red Cross report is credible? Why should people believe what these prisoners say about how they were treated?
Well, the Red Cross is in the business and indeed is given the right in international law to go in and supervise the treatment of prisoners of war. They have professionals who do this, who interview the prisoners individually. And in this particular case, all of these prisoners, all 14, were kept rigorously isolated throughout their detention. That was both at the black sites and at Guantanamo when they were moved there in September 2006. So before the Red Cross interviewed them, they had no chance to compare their stories, no chance to compare their experiences, and they gave accounts to the Red Cross interviewers over a period of days in long individual confidential interviews that are strikingly similar in almost every minute detail. And as the Red Cross writers themselves remark in the report, it strains credulity that all 14 people could essentially fabricate precisely the same stories in all their details without having any contact one with another. And so the Red Cross people, who are, as I say, professionals in this, believe that these accounts are credible. And I think one of the reasons I published these long quotations in the New York Review of Books article is so that readers, American citizens, can judge for themselves. And I think the accounts are compelling, chilling, and frankly, those who are worried about their authenticity, I would urge them simply to read them.
One of the remarkable things about the similarities between these different prisoners' descriptions is not just that it implies that they couldn't have all come up with the same story. It also implies that this was a very organized situation. This is not rogue CIA officers taking the gloves off and deciding what to do in the moment. What do you know? What do you believe? What do we know about the level of coordination between officials at these black sites and officials in Washington who might have pursued this as a matter of policy?
Well, we know, first of all, that the interrogators were in constant touch with their superiors at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. In fact, there is one of the interrogators of Abu Zubaydah, Mr. John Kariakou, gave an interview to ABC News that you can find on the internet, in which he detailed this rather extensively. I quote from this report, in which Mr. Kariakou essentially says, every time we had to use a new procedure, if we had to hit him, slap him, whatever, you would have to cable headquarters and get approval from the Deputy Director of Operations, which is a very high position in the CIA. Meanwhile, the Director of Central Intelligence at the time, this is the spring and summer of 2002 in the case of Abu Zubaydah, was George Tenet, who was traveling across the river every day to principals meetings at the White House. The principals committee includes the National Security Advisor, then Condoleezza Rice, the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of State, Colin Powell, the then Attorney General, John Ashcroft, the highest law enforcement official in the United States, of course, all of whom were briefed on this day by day, not least because George Tenet apparently was worried that he would get stuck with this, and he wanted to be sure that he had explicit confirmation that these procedures could go forward, and he wanted to consult with other cabinet officials to get that approval. John Ashcroft supposedly said at one point, we shouldn't be discussing this in the White House. History will not judge us kindly. That, again, is according to an ABC report. So the chain of decision-making from the interrogators in these black sites around the world to CIA officials in Langley, Virginia, and from the CIA to the White House itself is very well established. These weren't rogue officers who were doing these things. There's a fairly concrete line of responsibility down to the minute details of the interrogation techniques that were used.
And of course, the Senate Intelligence Committee says that they will spend the next year investigating CIA interrogation and detention. I think you've just done the first 10 months of work for them. Mark Danner, UC Berkeley professor, thank you for your work in this field. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.